Now, the war in Gaza has taken a significant economic toll in Israel. It hit tourism, which accounts for about 7% of Israel's economic activity, slowed down consumer spending as people were less inclined to leave home, and dented industrial and manufacturing activity. Economists currently estimate that the war will result in 0.5% drop in Israel's growth rate. Initial estimates by Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics show that in the second quarter of this year, growth was 1.7%. compared to 2.8% in the first quarter. But at the same time, Israel's stock market and tech sectors have shown tremendous resilience. And joining us now to discuss the economic impact of the war is Ido Aharoni, Israel's Consul General to New York. Ambassador, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ambassador Aharoni, how damaging has this war with Hamas been to Israel's economy? Which sectors have been the hardest hit?
Well, naturally, tourism was hit hard. We usually get around 4 million tourists a year. We think that right now we're collecting the information. We're looking at least 25% decline during the month of July alone, which is a big thing for us. However, it was somewhat compensated by increased domestic tourism right after the military operation ended. It's important for me to mention to our viewers, this was a military confrontation that was imposed on us by Hamas. This was not an Israeli offensive, as the Turkish representative said in their press release. So obviously tourism is a sector that is very vulnerable, very susceptible to geopolitical instability, and that's exactly what happened. Other than that, the Israeli market showed tremendous resilience, as you noted.
Before we get to the market, Israel was bombarded by thousands of rockets, but the Iron Dome did manage to intercept the vast majority of them and limited damage. But what about the economic impact that occurred when workers and factory workers and employees were running to bomb shelters?
Absolutely.
And the army reservists that were called up for duty? How does that impact the local economy?
Well, usually military confrontations do impact negatively the productivity level of the Israeli market and the Israeli labor force. In this case, because the confrontation was relatively longer than usual, it was 50 days, it's almost 2 months. We are now in the process of collecting all the information, and our assessment at this point is that the productivity of the Israeli economy was hit hard.
Despite this, the Tel Aviv 25, the stock market, up 7% year to date, up over 1% in the month, maintaining its momentum. The Israeli tech sector is still thriving. What do you attribute this to?
Well, it's all about know-how, it's all about technology, it's all about ideas, it's all about creativity. When your economy is technologically based on people producing ideas, today Israel per capita is the largest producer of conceptual products in the world. And so when your economy is based on ideas and technology and creativity, it gives you a tremendous degree of flexibility as well as resilience. And right in the middle of the war, right here in New York, an Israeli tech company raised nearly $900 million.
So is this conflict not deterring foreign direct investment into Israel?
We haven't seen any indication that that is the case. On the contrary, we saw people developing and continuing interest in Israeli economy and Israeli R&D. We now have in Tel Aviv in a few days a huge gathering of tech people called the DLD Festival. So things are happening and will continue to happen, thank God.
Well, Israel essentially has been in a state of war since its creation, but despite that, it's managed to maintain solid GDP growth, becoming one of the top economies in the region. Do you think that the impact of this war will be short-lived? Do you expect a bounce, or is it all dependent on how long the ceasefire maintains?
Well, it's all about the strength of the brand. In past years, our brand was weaker, and the recovery time was longer. Now our brand is much stronger, associated with creativity and innovation, and the recovery time is much shorter. So we estimate that within weeks, month, the latest, we will be back full steam ahead.
What about the role that emerging Asian economies are now playing in Israel's economy? Are they presenting themselves as alternative trading partners to those that may have political issues with Israel?
Well, to be honest, those who have political issues with Israel really don't impact the Israeli economy or Israeli business. Let me give you the example.
We just saw the Turkish economy minister saying that he may not go ahead with that gas deal. Does a country like China come in and step up and fill that void, perhaps?
Yes, I know that the Chinese government is very interested in doing an energy deal with us, but what the Turkish minister failed to mention is that despite of the so-called strain between Israel and Turkey over the last couple of years, trade between nations almost doubled. Our main expert and trade partners remain the United States and the European Union as a continent. Asia is improving its performance vis-a-vis Israeli trade and Israeli economy gradually.
The ceasefire has been in place since August 26. What happens next?
Well, you know, we're looking at what's happening around us, the disintegration of the Middle East, the disintegration of the Arab nation state, the rise of political Islam, the rise of radical Islam. And we're monitoring the situation very carefully, and we're preparing for all eventuality. One thing for sure, we will do whatever we have in order to protect ourselves from aggression of radical movements and radical organizations such as Hamas.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Ambassador Aharoni, Israel's Consul General.